Let me start by saying that this season is good. It's worth watching. Though this season presents a perspective I don't personally hold, that doesn't make it less interesting. And while something can go so far as to be offensive to a point that it holds no value, this season of True Detective does not do that. But I need to mention these things up front because it gets close. Some of you may be aware of my successful prediction of Season 3's plot points and are just here for a prediction, but we need to talk a little politics and themes first this time. This is a True Detective show. What that means is that it is a literary work that has a pointed thematic direction, along with some of the more surface-level elements of a weird literature work. It is almost formulaic in the way that it follows the conventions set up by Nick Pizzolatto, and I mean that in a good way, specifically to address the criticism that it's overly supernatural. Hallucinations have been a frequent and integral part of True Detective's aesthetic style since Season 1. It even uses the same motifs, with this drawing on the whiteboard being a direct reference to Season 1's spirals and circles. Triangles, or pyramids, or cones, are a spiral when viewed from the side. The spiral can also be considered the perspective when looking down the length of a tunnel. Additionally, as discussed in my Season 1 video, the spiral has connotations of activity in suggesting a changing world. Change can be resisted or encouraged. The circle is suggestive of passivity in an unchanging world. Effort cannot result in change in the circle's argument, so why bother? You can see how this represents what may be viewed by traditional philosophy and mysticism as a male-female dichotomy, with the tunnel-like activity-encouraging spiral representing masculinity and the circle representing femininity. This drawing on the board represents the act of mating. And it isn't just a motif. The story centers around the circle, at least. But this is night country. That is significant at this point in the discussion because this is an unbalanced story, purposefully. This is heavily biased towards the circle, the feminine perspective. The themes of the show center around women and their roles as dark mothers of existence. This line in the scientist bios oddly uses the phrase origins of existence. That is more of an astrophysics problem, which makes it stand out for a biological and geological research facility. This is because the Hebrew language reference to darkness in the facility name, Tzalal, is referring to the darkness before the creation of light. Mother Night to Father God, in the show's understanding. This is the origin of existence. Now, the references to the origin of life are perhaps more literal, I guess. The scientists are described as all male. That is important because guys only want one thing, and it is both disgusting and the origin of life. This is literally a joke about female reproductive anatomy, and it's pretty funny, actually. But moreover, it gives us some key insight into the direction of the show. The male scientists are being viewed through the lens of Frankenstein. Frankenstein takes a somewhat negative view of male scientific pursuits and portrays them as inadequate substitutes for the natural abilities of the female body. This negativity towards what the show sees as distinctively male intellectual pursuits, and other aspects of masculinity, is key in unraveling the mystery. My first major breakthrough this season was realizing who the she was in She's Awake. It's the bear. This is night country. That is significant in this part of the discussion because bears hibernate in winter. The men of the research station were likely lured outside by the prospect of observing the female bear in an unusual state. At least some of them. Maybe. I believe the bear to be responsible for the looks of terror around the dead men, at least, although it is possible they were caught in an avalanche because Lopez is enamored with Dyatlov Pass incident stories. I would still think the bear is involved in some way, particularly after the men, either researchers or miners, unwisely disturb it in some way.
Why are they naked?
Why are they naked? Likely some kind of boys' club initiation ritual for the men in the research station. They are likely going to be portrayed as having a frat-like atmosphere there, and some kind of men's group. The story will boil down to the men doing something stupid and juvenile in order to get themselves killed. The spiral markings will likely be some kind of legitimate Native American symbol that will have been appropriated by the white men's group for their own modernized male inclusivity rituals. This will be a commentary on cultural appropriation and colonialism for Lopez. And this season is so centered around this female perspective of women as mothers that men are shunted into a childlike role. That is the significance of Ferris Bueller playing in the recreation area. In that movie, we see both an irresponsible child in Ferris and a concerned mother that Ferris dupes into believing he is too sick to attend school. So on one side, we have all the tough, protective, and responsible no-nonsense motifs around women this season, and on the other, we see men portrayed as man-children beholden to their uncontrollable urges and juvenile pursuits. This feminine bias was pushed to an incredibly insulting extent in Episode 1. On one hand, men are portrayed as dangerously physically powerful, suggesting that women should be more protected by authorities. And on the other hand, the one negative female portrayal is used to show men as vulnerable to female sexuality and therefore less suitable as authority figures. Very having its feminist cake and eating it too. A more balanced portrayal would have potentially shown an authority figure protecting a woman from masculine physicality and protecting a man from feminine deception. Or alternatively, it could have shown an authority figure of female gender compensating for a male authority figure's shortcomings, and a male authority figure compensating for a stereotypical female shortcoming, like needing assistance to overpower a suspect. And even though the show does declare its intention to be unbalanced, this was offensive in portraying men with no good qualities. In addition, the supposed negative qualities of Navarro are not parallel to the negative qualities of Marty in Season 1. Marty's negative qualities are symbolic of his passivity to the values he supposedly upholds as a family man. The fact that this extends to his work on the case and role as a police officer is what makes this a negative portrayal.
And you look like you haven't seen your own bed in a couple of days, huh? Yeah?
He passively doesn't care about both his role as a husband and his role as a detective, at least at first. Navarro, though, is portrayed as using her domineering determination and bullheadedness to push her involvement in the case. While it may be possible the show shifts and portrays her aggressiveness as negative with real consequences for her work on the case, or even in her personal relationship, it hasn't done that so far. It seems to have a positive view of this aggressiveness as part of protective motherliness, hence the mama bear imagery. But the second episode rescues it from being too one-sidedly negative in its portrayal of men. For one, the second episode portrays men as sources of youthful energy to these responsible matronly women, particularly in the character of Travis. This is a very powerful positive portrayal. Frankly, it's a new and interesting perspective on the value of men in relationships with women, at least new to me. It was a little surprising, given how negative men were being otherwise portrayed. That said, with a little thought, we can see how this view of men encourages men to compete with each other to be the most pure expression of juvenile irresponsibility, in a possibly very destructive way, and represents a complete erasure of men as responsible adults or fathers. We'll see if the show addresses this. But in addition to this positive portrayal as sources of energy and fun, the young male officer, Jodie Foster's work son, is the one to basically solve the whole crime here in Episode 2. While the show portrays this in a pretty non-serious manner and it tries to deceive the audience here tonally to disbelieve him, he's actually laying out what really happened. Take these lines and compare them to my story of men doing something foolish, likely during a frat-like initiation ritual, one possibly interrupted by a polar bear.
I don't know, kid. Start asking questions.
Okay. Polar bear. The doors don't lock, right? To avoid accidents.
Okay.
When was it drawn?
Was it before they ran out, or was it after?
If it's before, it could be a prank or a game.
Why would he fold them?
I don't know. Was he taunting them? Did he make them fold them?
So it seems clear that the season is going to have what can be considered a mostly negative, infantilizing view of men relative to responsible, matronly women. Let me be clear, the portrayal of the men's group will be more of a juvenile frat/club rather than a powerful conspiratorial organization. That said, it is part of the message of the show that these frat-like clubs do in many ways hold the keys to power, despite their extreme informality and jocularity. I expect the men's group to be covering for Ray in some way. Likely not that he actually murdered his girlfriend, but that has a possibility. More likely they are covering that he has this weird shrine thing. They cover for him not because he controls their funding or has dirt on them or any such conspiratorial nonsense. They just cover for him because he is one of the bros. And the message of showrunner Issa Lopez is that this can be as nefarious as a massive coordinated conspiracy. Incidentally, I'll mention that it is possible the men's group is a local branch of a larger organization that includes the Louisiana Tuttles, but it will still likely be a completely mundane, frat-like men's group, probably similar to Shriners or Masonic groups or actual college fraternities. I also expect the mining operation will be portrayed as phallically drilling something that will cause some negative consequence. I do find the online suspicions of water contamination inducing hallucinations to be pretty convincing. It will fit the theme well. Incidentally, the hallucinations and dreams will be representative of, and an argument in favor for, a feminine, intuitive style of decision-making as compared with male science and rigor. This is also reflected in the conflict between the dead activist woman and her brother over the mine. If the activist woman was in fact killed to facilitate the mine, it will reflect the negative physical side of men portrayed in the opening episode. In this sense, the two sets of deaths will reflect both male-threatening dangerous physicality in the activist's murder and men's childlike vulnerability to poor decision-making with the researcher's accidental deaths, both portrayed in the opening episode where a man is arrested for assaulting a woman and a man is manipulated by a woman. And even though this season does make thematic points that I may disagree with, at least initially, it is not so extreme as to be offensive, and it is making these points in an interesting way. Like an argument that I don't agree with, I will still sometimes learn something by listening.
I can hear him just fine.
I'll probably have more to say about this season of True Detective, whether I'm correct or incorrect in my predictions. Please give this video a like, and consider subscribing to my channel if I said anything that made you think. This has been Shiva's Right Foot, and I'll talk to you next time.
And the less I seek my source for some definitive, closer I am to find, yeah, closer